Right, welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 advice video, and in this particular one we're going to be asking the question how to win at Warhammer 40,000. Now right from the start I'm going to say to you that it's not about winning the game. The most important thing is to enjoy yourself. That's the spirit of the game, and even in the rulebook Games Workshop say that the most important thing is to have fun. I'm a firm believer in not winning at all costs or just playing to win the game. But on the other hand, it is depressing if you play a game and you get absolutely hammered by the opponent. So even if you don't go on to win lots of games, if this advice can help you to win some, perhaps you're a new player or you have an army with a limited amount of choices, the advice here hopefully will help you at least give a good account of yourself on the battlefield, and you'll be able to, whoever you play against, you'll stand some chance at winning, and even if you get beaten, you'll still be able to put up a good fight. And these are just general strategic pointers that will help you in any game of 40k that you play. They're sort of overall things to bear in mind. And if you apply these principles, then your gaming will be a lot better. These are sort of things I've picked up over the years, and they're general principles. They're not specific to any faction. That's whatever faction you play and whatever opponent you're playing against, then these guidelines will help you out. So the first point is to know your army. Basically it means that you need to know what your army can do. You need to know the special rules, because if you're playing in a game and you forget one of your special rules, then that's going to put you at a disadvantage. So it really helps for you to know what your forces can do, what your weapons capabilities are, the ranges, any special rules that are attached to those weapons, and your units as well, and your characters. Just try and remember all of their rules. And it may help you just to write those things out, to have a sheet in front of you. But try and remember the rules and get those special rules right, because you'll be at a disadvantage if you don't remember them, and often your opponent is not going to remind you of them either. He's just going to continue on playing and not let you know that you've missed something out. So it's important to know your own force, to know the codex, and to know those special rules. And that's sort of an obvious one, but it's important to do that. And there's been games where I've forgotten a special rule, and it's the game's moved on, it's been too late, and sometimes that can actually cost you victory overall. So know your own army is the first point. Then secondly, to follow on from that, is to know your enemy, to know what his capabilities are and what his forces can do, so that you don't get caught out in a game. You up against a unit and suddenly it moves really far, or it fires a weapon at you weren't expecting. You can get caught out there as well. Now you may not be able to know, all the codexes and all the unit capabilities. I mean, that's difficult. I don't know all of the different units out there. So what I tend to do when I play a game of 40k and I'm up against someone new with a different force is just ask them, look over their force, see what they've got, and units that I know about, that's no problem. But if there's anything there that I'm not sure of, a character for example, or a unit I haven't seen before, then just ask them and say, what's this unit, what does it do? And if you're playing against someone who's honest and genuine enough, they'll just tell you what that unit is and what it can do. And just for a couple of minutes before the game starts, just so you've got an overall understanding of what their army is and what it's capable of, because if you get caught out, that can cost you dearly as well. So try and do a little bit of sort of recon, a little bit of scouting work over the enemy force, and that will help you out as well. So know your enemy is the second point. Right, then the third point, and this is an important one, and that is to have your battle plan. And when I go into a game, I pretty much have an idea of how I'm going to play the entire game. I've got my force in front of me. and then I look at the scenario, the enemy's forces, the terrain, and I stand back and think, right, how am I going to play this game out? And you develop a general plan of what you're going to do right before you even deploy your forces. You don't just stick everything out on the table and then wait to see what happens. You actually got to have some kind of overall plan before the game even begins, and then do your best to stick to that. Obviously, you may need to adapt as the game goes on, with unforeseen circumstances coming up. But try and stick to your overall battle plan. Think to yourself, right, I'm going to sweep around this left-hand flank, or I'm going to deep strike and take out particular units right at the start, or what you're going to hold back in reserve and deploy later on. You've got to have an overall plan of what you're going to do, and then stick to that. And that will help you stop any kind of confusion coming in the game, and also from units just wandering around the table without anything to do because you haven't planned for them correctly. So an important point, that one. Get yourself an overall battle plan. And then number 4, really what follows on from that is to try and have an educated guess at what the enemy's battle plan is going to be. What do you think your opponent's going to do? And you can judge that by the type of scenario and what faction he's playing, and also by what units he has. I mean, if he's got hordes of Tyranids and loads of close combat powered stuff, then it's obvious he's going to try and rush at your lines. So you're going to need to counteract that. Or if it's guard and he's got a Aegis defense line and loads of guardsmen, then you know that he's going to sit back. That's going to be part of your opponent's plan. So what are you going to do about that? How are you going to try and reach his position, or sit back, and are you going to be able to outgun them at the other end of the table? So try and figure out what the enemy's trying to do, and doing those two things, having your own battle plan and trying to understand the potential enemy plan, will help you out in games as well. Right, then next, what flows on from having your own battle plan and then trying to understand what the enemy's battle plan is unit roles. And that means you've got to decide what each of your units is going to do. Is it going to be part of your plan? That is it going to fulfill part of your plan? Is it going to be an attacking unit that's going to take an objective, for your part, as in actually winning the game for yourself? Or could it be a unit that's a countermeasure for the enemy's plan? You're expecting the enemy, say he's got Tyranids and he's got a load of deep striking monstrous creatures. You might separate a few units out from your force that are actually going to be countermeasures to that. So you're playing Space Marines, you're expecting the Morlock and Trigon to burst up near your lines, so you hold back a unit of Terminators, for example, and they're just to sit there and wait for that deep striking unit to arrive near your objective and then to counterattack. That's an example of deciding what a unit role would be, that it's going to sit back and defend an objective based on the enemy's plan. Or on the other hand, you can decide to put one of your units to fulfill your plan, to use a large unit of jet bikes, for example, to sweep round and take the enemy's objective later on in the game. So each unit, you need to decide what each unit is going to do, and then deploy it accordingly, or put it in reserve, or deep strike it, whatever. And then if you know what each of your units is doing, then that will help you in games as well. Right, then the next point, what I've called it here, is keep your cards close to your chest. And it's a strategy that I really like to use in games. You'll notice it especially in the Eldar battle reports, also with the Necrons as well. And that is that I like to keep a lot of units in reserve, so that the opponent is left guessing for the early part of the game. He's not sure where these units are going to turn up. And that means that if you're holding units in reserve, you can use them to counter-effect or counter-attack the enemy's moves, and also have that element of surprise. And that really, really does help in games. That if you're able to bring on a large portion of your force from reserve, it means you're not showing the opponent everything straight away. You're actually keeping them guessing the whole time. For example, you've got a unit of 10 Dire Avengers in your Eldar force, and you stick it on your objective at the beginning of the game. that is predictable. It's obvious that those Dire Avengers are going to sit there and try and hold that position. And if you're in a predictable situation, then the opponent can plan and prepare for that, how to deal with those, and you're just left sitting there. But to be unpredictable is a nightmare for the opponent to play against. You've got flanking units, doesn't know what flank they're going to turn up on, how they're going to deploy, or you've got deep striking units that could turn up anywhere on the table. Then it leaves the opponent disjointed. He can't fulfill his complete plan because your forces haven't arrived in their full strength yet. So critical point, that one. Really enjoy using it, and it makes the game really interesting as well. You'll see in the battle reports that we play, units turning up on the flank and deep striking adds a really nice dimension to the game and changes the face of the game in a very short space of time. So keep your cards close to your chest is a really important element of winning games of 40k. Another critical point is what I've called here play the mission. You've got to understand what the mission is and to develop a plan to actually win the game and keep the mission itself as the most important point. If you lose sight of the mission, you may perform really well in the game, you may kill more of the opponent's forces, but you may lose the mission because you haven't stuck to what the actual objectives are. So if it's one objective each, then play the game to the mission. Think, how am I going to hold my objective is the most important thing. You may lose your best units doing it, but if your troops hold that objective and you're able to disrupt the enemy's objective, to challenge it or to take it, then you'll win. So keep the mission in view and play the game to the mission and time your turns. You've got to leave the last few turns of the game for trying to get to those objectives and holding them as well. I mean, often I try and play the mission where, with the Eldar for example, I keep my troops choices, the jet bikes, out of trouble, and then on the last few turns of the game they zoom in and they play the mission, they try and take those objectives and hold them, and often it works pretty well. I use my best units, those they take the damage and sometimes get destroyed, pushing the enemy forces back or wiping them out, and then it's the weaker troops that come in and claim the objectives at the end of the game. But it seems to work really well. But keep the mission in view, and that will help you greatly as well. The next few points are just sort of smaller points, but they're important. The next one is order of play. That just means that you watch the opponent do his turn, and then as you're watching that and seeing as the game unfolds and develops, you need to start thinking in your mind, what am I going to do when it's my turn? And you need to have the whole turn sort of worked out in your head, what each unit's going to do, and where it's going to move. Is it going to fire? What are its chances of being effective if it does fire? And just figure out what that whole force is going to do on that turn. Sort of work out the whole thing in your head. It's like a chess. A good chess player will be 5-6 moves ahead of the actual move that he's making. Every move that he makes, he's thinking ahead of where it's going to end up ultimately, and good players at 40k will do that. They'll know what a unit's doing, and in their mind they've got a vision of where that unit's going to end up and what it's going to achieve in the game. So try and figure out what you're going to do each turn. Don't be reacting all the time to what the opponent's doing, but have an order of play and how you're going to fulfill that turn. Also, the order of play is important. You're trying to take out units in a transport. You want to move in one unit to destroy the transport, and then move up another unit in support that can charge them then after the shooting phase, and in the melee phase they can charge in and wipe that unit out. It's sort of building up the correct order of things for you to have a successful turn. Next thing, it sort of flows in there, the next thing to bear in mind is what I've called mutual support, and that is what can really help you in games is to have units working together. For example, you've got a mobile unit that's heavy anti-tank, like fire dragons, for example, and then you've got a unit that's very good in close combat. Perhaps you've got a Wraith Knight coming up behind. You could deploy the fire dragons, they take out a transport vehicle, and then the Wraith Knight is then able to charge the units that is inside the transport vehicle. Unit combinations, units working together, mutually supporting each other, can really enhance each other. Units firing and other units protecting, and just those kind of combinations. Eldar are famous for it, but any faction, any race in 40k, you can use that ability. Units supporting each other. You send out one unit on its own, for example, in a game, it can get picked off and the opponent can deal with it. But units working together and combining their forces, firepower and strengths, can be very effective indeed. And the next one is what I've called reach, and that is in the game. Often you will lose a game of Warhammer 40,000 if you're unable to reach certain parts of the battlefield. If you've got no mobility left in your army, you've only got forces that can walk, or you've got slow moving vehicles, and you can't get to the far corner of the table, then you've got trouble. If the opponents manage to pick off your faster moving stuff and you're just left with ground forces, and his opponents are way up, his objectives are way up in the corner of the table, and you're unable to reach it, then you're in big trouble as far as the game is concerned. So try and bear that in mind. You need units in your force. This is obviously for when you're choosing your army. You need units in your force that are highly mobile, ones that can either deep strike, or they're fast moving, or they're inside a transport that's quick moving, and that can reach parts of the battlefield quickly. That's very important indeed. And then in the game, units that are highly mobile, you've got to try and keep them alive, not let them get picked off, because a clever opponent is going to try and take out those units that are fast moving and dangerous in that respect, and they'll try and make you a slower moving force. So for example, you'll see it in the Eldar force, again I mentioned them, that are trying to keep the jet bikes alive and out of trouble, and they're able to use that tremendous speed later on in the game when everything quietens down to then zoom in and take objectives or contest the opponent's objectives. So those are the points that I've got there for how to win at Warhammer 40,000. Again, I say to you, it's not about winning the game, but I do feel sorry for people, especially newer players, younger players. They go out and they play against more experienced people, or they're new to the game, and then they get absolutely hammered, and it can put you off playing. If you get really soundly beaten, it's depressing. You spent ages putting your army together and it gets smashed to bits, and then I've seen it with other players. They've been beaten really bad, and they it's sad for them. So I've put this video together. It's not about winning the game at all costs, but even if you do lose, it's nice to still be able to put up a really good fight and give a good account of yourself. And if you keep those points in mind, those are good pointers to help you perform well in games of 40k. And check out the battle reports on my channel. You'll be able to see these principles being used. If you have these principles in front of you, you'll be able to watch the game and you'll be able to see them actually being used as the game actually. So first of all, know your army, know the actual force that you have, what it's capable of, and any special rules. And then know your enemy, know what your enemy is able to do, so you don't get caught out in games. And then you've got to have your overall battle plan. Before the game even begins, you've got to decide, right, what am I going to do? How am I going to fulfill this mission? And how am I going to, the whole framework of what you're actually going to do in the game. And then you've got to try and anticipate what the enemy's battle plan is going to do. He's not just going to sit there and let you fulfill your plan. He's going to have a plan that he's going to want to do as well. So you've got to think to yourself, how am I going to counteract that? And split off any units that you may need to counteract what they're going to do. And then allocate unit roles. Number 5, you've got to give your units certain roles to fulfill in the game. Are they part of your plan? Are they going to go after objectives and to get into the opponent's side of the table? Or are you going to give them like a countermeasure role? Are they going to try and counter the opponent's plan? Are they for moving up quickly or for holding back? Are they priority for long range shooting or short range just give each unit a role, so that you don't have units floating around not knowing what to do. Each unit has a job to do in the game. Make that decision before the game even begins and before you even deploy your force. Then number 6, keep your cards close to your chest. Try and keep the element of surprise in your force. So put units in reserve, deep strike and flank, and that adds a diverse element to your force. It keeps your opponent guessing, and having your opponent then has to react to what you're doing, which is always a better way to fight a game. And number 7, play the mission. You've got to stick to the actual mission itself. You've got to clearly understand what the mission is, and then stick to your plan of how to actually complete that mission. If it's objectives, then you've got to keep those objectives in mind, or whatever type of mission it is, stick to it. You may have less of a force left at the end of the game, but if you fulfill the mission and get those victory points, then you'll win the game. And then number 8, order of play. That is number 8 is order of play, and that is in your mind. You're sort of watching the opponent in his turn, seeing what he does, and then as that turn's being fulfilled, you're just watching and then making up your own mind what you're going to do in your turn, sort of having a plan of action and a sequence, an order of play as to how you're going to fulfill your turn, which is important, how you're going to move stuff, and then especially in the shooting phase, what's going to shoot first, what's going to shoot later. For example, you may want to use one unit to open a transport up, to blow it up, and then use another unit then to shoot up the contents, or to use a unit to blow up a transport and then have another unit in position ready to charge it in the assault phase. So the order of play, a set plan of how you're going to fulfill that particular turn. And then number 9 is mutual support, and that's just having units that are supporting each other. Units that are on their own can get isolated and picked off by enemy forces, so it's better to have units that are together and supporting each other with firepower and in melee, and protecting each other's weaknesses as well as enhancing each other's strengths when units are combined together. And then finally, number 10 is reach, and that just means to try and preserve the mobile element of your force. Often in games I've seen that when an army has been reduced to sort of a static force, it's not able to move very fast, then it really struggles in games. So keep the mobile elements of your force alive, and then use them in the latter turns to take objectives, for example, or to contest the enemy's position. So those are the points there, those 10 points, and as I've said before, it's not about winning games of 40k, but it is nice to do well and for your army to give a good account of itself. And I think that if you apply those points there, especially if you're new to Warhammer 40,000 or you're a younger player, try and get in the habit of applying those to your games, and hopefully they will enhance the way that you play your games of Warhammer 40,000. But above all, enjoy yourself as you do it, and enjoy the hobby overall. And if you actually win a game, then that just counts as an added bonus. But take on these points, and I'm sure they'll help you. Check out the battle reports. You'll actually be able to watch these points being used in games, and you'll be able to see them actually applied. And then check out the comments section under this video, where a lot of other players, I'm sure, will be leaving their comments and tips on how they win their games as well. And if you are an experienced player watching this, then leave your feedback, and then others can read it for themselves as well. So thanks for watching this video. I hope it helps you out in your games, and tune in next time.